Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Tonight we're looking at the magnificent CharlesBPierce horror film come docudrama come cryptozoological gateway drug for an entire generation of monster kids in the 1970s and probably well into the 1980s. Of course, I'm talking about the film The Legend of Boggy Creek. I adore the movie. I think it's probably the greatest Bigfoot film ever made. Does Jason agree? Or are we going to clash? Anyone want to find out? Watch tonight's Mysterious Library.
It's another mysterious library. And yeah, let them fight. But before we get too far into it, I am recovering from having something. Y'all may have heard last week, my voice was kind of starting to go. And come Thursday, my voice was gone. So yeah, I'm finally on the other side of this thing. It's a minor flu that's going around. Like everyone who went to the Dogman conference got it. So yeah, it was fine. It was a minor thing, just, jacked with the old vocal cords. You know how it goes. But yeah, anything new and exciting over on the Dr. Bertram side of the fence before we get to blows?
Well, I'm just wondering if what the type of virus you guys might have caught, like some canid hybrid virus. They talk about swine flu. Maybe this is like
Yep.
dog flu or something at the Dogman conference.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Something like that.
But as far as excitement, my daughter's back full swing in homeschool, which is always fun. So it's nice to jump into another year's curriculum on there. Busy working away at the Ray Palmer, Richard Shaver documentary, the man who invented flying saucers. And fall dropped here really quickly. Like all the leaves just turned, like in a week. It
Really?
was green, and then boom, it's like, what on earth happened? So my yard's covered in leaves. The pumpkins are turning orange. Fall is setting in the North Woods. And I never want summer to go, but then when fall gets here, I'm like, oh, I love fall. So,
It's so you can get your pumpkin spice lattes. Is that it?
No, I think I like the the ritual of seasons in America. Like, I like the fact I've harvested half of my potatoes. I have to harvest my pumpkins. I have to bring in the firewood for the winter. It's transformative. Sydney, my life. I mean, I was a big city boy in Sydney. It didn't matter what season it was. It just meant, did I go out in a t-shirt or did I go out with a sports coat or a leather jacket? That was all it meant. It didn't affect me in any meaningful way, the weather. But here, my entire life shifts depending on the seasons.
That's fair. That's fair. So I like y'all's names for the potential virus in question. I like Bristol's CryptVid-19.
It's fantastic.
Cryptid Nerd Flu. All right, it's not wrong. I'm going to try changing the color of for whatever reason, my green screen is freaking out. It's probably because there's something here waiting for me. Well, that didn't help out at all.
Yeah, sometimes the camera
made it worse.
the camera can cue on the green screen. I think that's the problem, and then your skin tones can go whackety whack whack. Who knows?
Whackety whack whack, is that a technical term?
Yeah, that's from all my years in filmmaking. The whackety whack whack color, auto color, temperature shift, the whackety whack shift they call it in the industry. Just between you and me. Nobody's actually using auto white balance in real filmmaking, but most prosumer or consumer cameras do. So that's the problem. I don't know if you have. Maybe that's the thing you need. This is going to start boring the audience. Maybe can you do a manual white balance there and hold up like a white card in front of your face?
Hold on, let's try that.
I don't know if you want to do.
Let's just do it right now. Look right here.
There you go.
It's my little soundboard. So Is it? Oh, look at that. Look at that. See, this is why I keep an Australian around. He knows things like white balance.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to talking about Legend of Boggy Creek with you, because we haven't chatted about it much, but I have the feeling that you're not the avid fanboy of this movie as I am.
I think this is one where we're going to disagree. Now, I'm going to say this. I think a large part of this is going to be us talking about the impact, because I do think it is a very impactful, film. I don't think I will never take anything away from this film. I just happen to think the best Bigfoot movie of all time is actually the one I just shared you, Willow Creek. However, I do want to throw one asterisk on here where I think we can have them live side by side as the ultimate Bigfoot films. And and the reason is this. Whereas Willow Creek is a film, right? Like, it is a fictional movie. Let's be honest. Legend of Boggy Creek's actually just sort of a documentary. It is the proto monster quest. Because even though it has sort of some of those 1970s, there was that weird sort of indie feeling where people would just break out into like some sort of folk song in the middle of a movie. I just rewatched Lord of the Hobbit that they did on the animated one. And it's like, for no reason, just here's this folk song that's going to help move the story forward, right?
Yeah, that Hobbit's embarrassing compared to the Basky Lord of the Rings, which is so good. That Hobbit is awful. Comparatively.
I love that one. I love that, and I still love it. I still think it's great. But yeah, the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings is pretty awesome.
I think it's almost better than Peter Jackson's three-piece film. Mind you, Peter Jackson's is a masterpiece. I'm not going to say anything against it, but I think that 70s animation. Is it Bakshi? I always get this. I'm not the animator. What is it?
Yeah,
Bakshi?
No, it's Ralph Bakshi. No, you had it right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Completely. We need to review Wizards, because that is also
that's good too.
Masterpiece. But yeah, here's my thing. I just don't think I think of Boggy Creek as something more like a documentary rather than, say, a film. Right?
Well, it's its own beast. I think it's outside. I think it hovers between both realms. I mean, it's obviously a docudrama in the strictest sense, but it's also a horror film which has a naivety attached to it. Because remember the film, it was his first film, CharlesBPierce. He just got this kind of hankering to make a movie, borrowed, I think, $150,000 shot this movie. No distributor would touch it. And it was one of the most successful independently released films of all time up until then. It grossed like $25 million or something. And it's because it did something which I think today we're so spoilt by, we're so used to seeing in the horror genre. We're so used to seeing this kind of cinema verite style, or found footage as it often is disguised as, or telling a story while trying to, help suspend disbelief even further while pretending it's true. But this movie, when it came out, and I think still today, I think it still suspends disbelief to an incredible, okay, when you're watching Monster Quest, I love Monster Quest, it's one of my favorite shows, but you're watching a documentary, it's doing the standard good documentary tropes, but as you know, it's cutting between witnesses, and it's got the scientific experts, and it's got decently done reenactments, but it doesn't feel like you're watching a horror movie. This movie, the final
it
scene,
does feel like
the final big sequence where the Bigfoot's attacking the Ford house for like 3 or 4 nights or however long it is, that's some intense, really frightening stuff. And the way that Pierce shows the monster, obviously because he had no budget, but it's always in shadows, and it's always, you can't quite see it, it's in the distance. That's more convincing than the Patterson Gimlin film, almost, right? It's certainly more convincing than any other Bigfoot movie I've ever seen, as far as that could be 100%. Some weird critter out there, and he does his minimalist thing to achieve it. And also, of course, the fact that so much of the cast, now there are some actors, but so much of the cast are the eyewitnesses themselves coming back to the location where it happened. The fact that he's shooting in 72, less than a year after that major house attack on the Ford residence that I was talking about, and in the middle of what's an ongoing flap, there's a real immediacy to the film, which I don't think you normally get in any kind of crypto documentary I've ever seen, or even a horror film, because then you're suspending your kind of disbelief, willingly, because you're partaking in it. Here, you almost don't have to even, hang it on the door. It's almost like Pierce rips it off you and throws your disbelief away, and you feel like you're in this particular time, this particular place, with these genuine rednecks who are talking in their southern drawl, and they're not actors, and even the actors don't feel like actors. Even the actors he probably just got from some local theater troupe or something, so they feel like genuine, southern actors. So there's 100%. Something about I've never seen another movie like it. The closest thing I can think of, as far as when I experience it, that it actually feels like I'm watching something real, and that isn't real, of course, is Cannibal Holocaust, which we won't talk about on a kid or family friendly show. But there are very few movies of any kind, documentary, docudrama, certainly fictional movie, that you go into and get all of these like kind of hits from all sides. So you get a cool narrative, you get scary bits, you feel like it's real. There's something there really is something unique about this movie, and that's why I think 100%. It's the greatest Bigfoot movie ever made. I don't mind Willow Creek. I don't mind It Exists. I don't mind some of the other, 70s Bigfoot movie knockoffs of this, but no film captures an atmosphere, I'd almost say, in any film I've ever seen, the way Boggy Creek does. And it's this weird time capsule of 1972 Southern Arkansas culture. Like, there's something about this movie
100%.
Which elevates it, I think, out of almost any other film that I've ever seen. I'm not saying it's better than any movie I've ever seen, but I'm saying it's a different movie to almost any other film I've ever seen.
So that's a very valid point, right? Where most other films, you have, again, like you said, there's a suspension of disbelief. You have to have something that says, okay, I'm going to forgive the obvious issues here and roll with the conceit of the film, right? Get that completely, really do. And I think you've got a very valid point, because it was filmed on location, with many of the people being I just saw that. Now the only question is, would Tyler Perry play Medea, or would he play the Bigfoot? So that's the only real question I've got on that one. But you're right. The fact that it's there, these are the real people encountering these things, which is why, for me, it really does feel more like a documentary, but not in the documentary in the standard sense. Something more like monster. It's a proto Monster Quest film, because even the attack, right? The scene where the creature is reaching through, again, just some of the best film you'll ever see, is when he reaches down and is grabbing the dude on the toilet. Like that's got to be the single scariest thing of all time, is that thought. But even that's based on real events. Essentially, it's a recreation of an event. Again, the impact of Boggy Creek and the things that he did with it are, I think it's one of those 1 in a million kind of things. It's a lightning in a bottle kind of a thing. It's just the right movie at just the right time. And you're right, he didn't have the budget for a really expensive creature suit, which would have absolutely detracted from the realism of this. The fact that you never really see the creature, I think, is, to your point, one of the best things about this, because like Bigfoot himself or themselves, this creature's anonymity is the thing that gives it the most believability, because now your mind's working on this. Your mind is creating the drama. And most films, particularly today, they're like, well, we've got this super whiz-bang computer. Let us knock out all of these super special effects scenes. And it just keeps getting worse and worse because you keep showing us more and more. And this movie's like, I ain't going to show you anything. And the things they do show you are just enough to let your mind race. Honestly, one of the scariest scenes, the first time I watched it, was when, I forget her name, but it was the woman with the children out in the field. And the creature's just standing there in the middle of the field. Like, it's still basically blacked out. So it's just this figure of something that just doesn't look right. Just standing out in this field, no detail at all. And of course, she freaks. I love the fact that one of the kids takes off and is like, I'm out. I don't care. The rest of my family can get eaten by this thing that's sitting out here. I ain't going to do anything about it. And just runs. And of course, the mother's grabbing the kids and trying to run out of there. But it's just the creature is just standing there in this field. And it's like, at first she's like, there's nothing, everything's fine. And she looks up and there's this thing that's not supposed to be there. It is, for me, that's still the scariest scene, because I've had stories told to me like that. I think we've all had that moment where something's not there. Maybe it's not anything overly scary, but something's there that you don't expect to be there, and you freak out because you see it. Well, imagine that thing being there is a creature that's not supposed to exist, that you don't think is real, and it's standing 30, 40 yards away, looking at you and your children. I can't imagine anything more terrifying than that. And it plays so well on screen. It's such a short story too. Like, it's just, here's your story, and they move on. And it's like, it's the matter of factness with how it's presented that, to your point, just really drives home the impact of that scene and the power of it. And I think that is the power of the Legend of Boggy Creek. To your point, is it takes your suspension of disbelief away, just rips it out. It's like, it's not even, I need you to suspend your, it's like, nope, I don't want you to. And then it never betrays that throughout the entirety of the film. Again, I will never take anything away from this film. I think there's a really, really good argument to be made that it is the best Bigfoot film of all time. I just think it's Willow Creek. But that being said, and we'll talk, when we do Willow Creek, we'll explain that one. Yeah, we'll do a compare and contrast. But again, the thing I love about this is, to your point, 100% is it's real. I grew up knowing people like this. Okay, that's Texarkana. Fouke, where this has happened. It's the Texarkana area. I am a Texan. I have family that came out of Deep East Texas, which is basically the same thing. People know what I'm saying. If you know, you know, right? I spent over 4 years in Nacogdoches, Texas, which again, that's Deep East Texas. I know people like this. Heck, some of my own family's people like this. I spent way more time in the country than most people realize. Again, I spent a long part. Donnie was surprised here. I spent a large part of my life trying to avoid my native accent. Oh, real quick, yes. Oh, the mom was. Oh, I didn't realize it was Miss Pierce's wife. I did know the girl was Pam. So, yeah, Pamela Pierce, Pamela, great woman. Spoken with her many times. Worked on a minor project, and nothing came of it. Long story, but it's Lyle Blackburn sort of rediscovering this and in breathing life into the Legend of Boggy Creek is one of these great events in the history of this film, because now we get a Blu-ray of this film. Like when I saw it, it was one of those cheap pirate copies that it just looks like trash, right? You could barely make out what was going on. Now that it's in Blu-ray, you can really sort of appreciate, again, for people like me who were born a little too late to see it in a drive-in when it initially came out. I never even saw it on videotape. It's been very recently when I saw the film. I was more of an in search of kind of guy. It being able to see it in Blu-ray changes it really does change the book. It changes the story because you can really see what Pierce was able to capture. And it's, again, it is that moment in time. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
Yeah,
do.
It's one of the greatest films in the horror genre ever, I think, and its influence on people like Eduardo Sanchez, one of the creators of the Blair Witch Project, for example, it resonates through lots of things. Certainly, as you said, Lyle Blackburn, he counts his monster interest as a child coming from seeing this movie, because like you, as you were just saying, he could associate with it. It was only 3 hours away from where he grew up. It was his backyard. And as far as, just to go rewind a little bit, because I think it's important to talk about some of the cinematic significance of the movie as well. Pierce, you're right, as we both said, is very good at minimizing our visibility or our view of the Bigfoot, which increases, I think, it ratchets up the terror, ratchets up the unknown, makes it more believable. But he also, in the reverse of that, does a great job on focusing on human, particularly female human faces in absolute horror. So we were talking about, who I didn't know either, was Charles's wife in that scene with the scared mother out with the kids, but the teenage girls looking through the window. The Ford's wife and his roommate's wife, and the other girl looking, like, there's constantly women looking out of windows in abject terror. And there's something about only being able to vaguely see what they see of it all, and then seeing these big close-ups on these very authentic female faces that aren't actresses, looking like they're seeing something that scared the bejeebers out of them. It's very effective. And, sometimes he does that classic kind of freeze frame on the screaming faces, which, Rob Zombie does later in movies, because
he
70s
does.
would do that. It would freeze on people in these moments of terror. But there's something about this movie which, as Joe Fox was asking before, should he see it? He should absolutely see it. Anybody who's interested in docudrama, horror, or cryptozoology owes it to themselves to see this movie. And
Susan, go see it. Yeah, go grab it. It's on. You can rent it on like Amazon if you want. You can buy it in Blu-ray. It's been digitally enhanced. It's great.
Yeah, it's really worth seeing. And it's a time capsule as well. And one of the things there are a number of things I like about it on the time capsule level. I love the 70s, so I love to see that period. But it also reminds us that cryptozoology used to be considerably different. The way we looked at things used to be considerably different. The way that this movie could be presented and be a breakout success because everybody was genuinely terrified there might be a Fouke Monster running around at that period in time, it fascinates me also. I think it's also worth pointing out that the movie talks about the Fouke Monster and even has a song about the Fouke Monster as if there's only one of them. The creature is lonely out there in the sulfur bottom, so it comes towards humanity in hope of finding a mate. Like, these ideas you can see them exist in earlier versions of cryptozoology where there was the idea of the Loch Ness monster. There was the idea of the abominable snowman, just Bigfoot, like there was one of them. And the Fouke monster, there was just one. Nobody then, or nobody certainly presenting this film. Later it changed when they did a sequel and there was a suggestion there was a mate and a child. But this movie itself, as much of cryptozoology then did, because there weren't people like Lyle Blackburn and Ken Gerhard running all over the place.
No,
there were just stories in local papers. And so people would
Mm-hmm.
have monsters in their backyard. Nobody was talking about, is there a breeding population that can let these things live here? It would just be, there's a monster. And it was often thought of, and this isn't the only example, the Fouke monster might have had the monster, but there were lots of communities around America which would have an encounter with something strange like this. Momo comes to mind, is another one. The Lizard Man's another. There's so many of them where it's spoken of almost like there's an assumption there's just one of them. And we don't
Blake Worth Goatman.
A Goatman. Mothman is another classic example, which I was only talking about with Steve Ward the other night on Talking Weird, because Mothman, the Mothman Festival is coming up, which is also from that approximate time. So it's interesting to see that cryptozoology then literally presented these animals, or these, not that they're animals, I mean, I think they're paranormal, but these creatures, they were presented like it was a universal monster movie. Like there's one Dracula, there's one Frankenstein, there's one Wolfman. Here there's one Momo, there's one Fouke monster, there's one abominable snowman, there's one Loch Ness monster. So it was really a different time. And can you imagine now somebody seriously proposing that Bigfoot there was just one of them and he was lonely, and he was going out into the woods and coming towards human society because, he wanted to find a mate, but he has to spend his life alone. And there's even a folk song about him, which incidentally in the 70s, folk songs it seems really weird now when we hear this folk music. But as you were mentioning before, it appears in other movies, including horror movies. Lucio Fulci, the great 70s Italian horror director, has a wonderful Western movie called Four of the Apocalypse, which is I don't recommend it for children, but it breaks down in folk songs during that. And it sings about what's happening, or what's just happened in that act, or what's going to happen in the next act. So it wasn't that unusual, even in genre cinema, to have something fade away into a folk song in a transitionary moment between scenes or between acts. But again, this all places you in a very unique space and time. And when you watch this, you can feel like you're back there, seeing cryptozoology through fresh eyes, perhaps, compared to what we're kind of sick of talking about. For those of us sick about talking about breeding populations and that kind of stuff.
I will never be sick of talking about breeding populations. But that's for Untold Radio After Dark. Real quick, I did know this, and Craig, as always with the info, CharlesBPierce, the director of the film, sang both songs in the film. So both fantastic. those folk tales, that's him. Like, again, this movie was made very, very cheaply, and which is why it was so profitable. It was, again, it's a great film. I think I know what the divide is here. Okay. The divide between us, just us two. Like I said, I view it more as a documentary. You are viewing it as a horror film because that's how it was presented, right?
Well, I'm viewing it as a piece of cinema. I mean, I don't view it. I don't view it purely as a documentary. I view it probably primarily as a docudrama / horror film. But I understand that it's also, as I said in the intro, this cryptozoological gateway drug for an entire generation of monster kids in the 70s. But it's a piece of cinema.
Point, right?
Pierce was making a piece of cinema. He wasn't out there like Doug Hychek on Monster Quest, really wanting to see if he could find the existence of Bigfoot. This was a cool story. He had an exploitative, not meaning that in a bad way, but an exploitative understanding of what might make a good film, and he raced down there with 150 grand and with a camera and made the film, right? So this is like George Romero making Night of the Living Dead at that golden moment when he made it in 68. It's the same thing. It's a filmmaker with an idea making something which captured a cultural moment and which people are still talking about 50 years later.
Right. And I get, and that's where I think our point of separation is, right? Because again, I came into it later, after Monster Quest, after these things. So in my head, I'm looking at the proto Monster Quest versus, I'm just not that big of a horror fan myself. Like, again, I don't see Godzilla. I'm sorry, Godzilla's not a horror film, right? It's there are monster movies. I think I do think monster films are different from like horror films, right? And I think that's where our divide is. But but the thing I think we absolutely agree on, it's a brilliant film. It's an absolutely brilliant film, and I think one of the reasons I don't see it as necessarily a true sort of horror film is because it does, and I see where you're coming from. And I think you're right. Okay, it's just this is me putting it on me, but I do think you're right. It's just in my head I can't get out of that idea of it being more proto monster quest, and so I've always seen it as more of a minor deficiency of the film. But now that, or let me phrase this, from a horror standpoint, I would see it as a minor deficiency of the film, but as a documentary, I wouldn't see it as a deficiency. There is very clearly a subtext in the film, right? And it's one of those things where if you know, you see it pretty quickly and pretty clearly, but they don't explore it it's not really explored as a theme, which is why I see it more as a documentary. It's just, hey, let's present these stories, which is the men, with the exception of the last one, the attack in the Ford house, the men only ever see the creature when they're out hunting or the creature is stealing food, right? Or crossing the road. That's it. The women and children, the Bigfoot is coming to them to investigate them. Like and for those of us in the field, we've heard that story. I can't tell you how, heck, even in Metroplex Monsters, most of the time when a Bigfoot or other cryptid is involved in it, like it's going up to see what's going on, it's a female, right? Or it's a young child, or both. And that's what we see in this film. And it's like, and I think in my brain, if I was saying, well, it's a horror film, they would have talked about that maybe a little bit more, or leaned into that to sort of like, it's coming for your women, right? Or it's coming for your children, kind of a thing. But they don't do that, which is why I think I can't get it out of my head that this is more docudrama kind of a thing.
Well, it's
But
definitely a
it's
docudrama,
brilliantly made.
but it's exploitation docudrama. It's not like a docudrama about, I don't know, there was a racial strife in the town and it goes in there as a series. It goes in there. It's a monster movie. Like the topic is a monster movie. And I think it's worth noting that CharlesBPierce's next most memorable and most famous film is The Town That Dreaded Sundown. So he's a genre filmmaker. I mean, it's his space that he's operating in.
Yeah,
but
and he's very good at it. That's a great film, by the way. Like that's
it's a top film.
And I see your point, right? I see your point. I think you've got a really great point here, which is it's very much its own kind of, it's its own monster.
And again, that, you know why that is? It's because he's not a filmmaker. He's like an advertising guy who realizes this could be a successful movie. So he's not approaching it like somebody who has written a traditional, I don't know, 3-act structure with, the hero's journey and, doing everything he was taught to in film school. He's gone out there. He's linked to these various monster sightings of a monster flap together. He's developed the idea of a narrator who we see at the beginning as a little boy who comes back to the house at the end. And throughout it, it's his voice that we hear, we're traveling with. So he's worked out a narrative device to tie all of the incidents together. But it's not like we follow that little boy throughout his life as he battles the monster and anything else. It's just a device, so we've got somebody explaining to us what's happening. So it isn't constructed the way a normal horror film's constructed. And it's also not constructed the way a normal documentary is constructed. And part of that, I think, is because Pierce was the outsider. Pierce wasn't somebody who came into this having crewed on 20 other people's movies and had gone to film. This is somebody who has a great idea and just goes, screw the rules. I'll get 150 grand a camera and I'll make this thing. And that's the magic of the movie. I think that's why it feels so different and why we're having difficulty going, well, is it a docudrama? Is it a documentary? Is it a horror movie? What is it? It's because it's all of those things. And it's also
one.
And it's also none of them, because it's his own beast, which Pierce has kind of just developed this genre. And the moment when he finds himself in the middle of a monster flap that he can kind of exploit into a movie. So
no,
it's
100%.
it's a fascinating. There should be more attention
Brilliant.
paid to this movie
Mhm.
just in the history of cinema. Period. Forget horror and forget
Yeah.
cryptozoology. Just the history of cinema alone. This movie's
Mhm.
pretty significant in, I think.
And I think that's a great, again, you're the film guy, right? Like, from a true critic, reviewer, film historian perspective, I think you're 100% right. Again, the one thing we keep coming back to is it's the authenticity of this film that drives home its power, which is why it has stayed around for what, 50 years now?
Yeah,
Going on 50 years?
it's over 50. 72 it came out.
Yeah. I mean, this is it's an indie cult classic that will never go away because again, even before Pamela got the rights back to do what she's done to reintroduce it to these new generations, it never left. It wasn't like one of those things that it just fell out of copyright and nobody bothered with it and it's just whatever, it's just lying around. People were still trying to get it out there because it has that power, because it is so unique. It is its own thing, and it's in what he does with it. Like you said, it's brilliant because of that authenticity. These are the real people, and even the actors are people of that area, right? Brilliantly done. It doesn't, again, it isn't something I don't think you'll ever really see it again. I think the closest thing we can equate to it as far as impact, honestly, is the Blair Witch Project, right? I mean, that's what it is. This is, and you pointed out, this helped inspire it, the idea of sort of found footage, right? It is, again, this is one of those movies that's not just influential, it's good. Sometimes there are lots of films that are influential that aren't very good from time to time, right? But they spark ideas. This happens to be both. And it's because you're right. Pierce was an outsider, and sometimes you need that outside perspective to say, I can do something a little different here. And it worked. And
Yeah,
it worked brilliantly.
absolutely. Imagine it wouldn't have been the same film if he was a
Mhm.
cryptozoologist and went in there, or if he was a documentarian
Mhm.
and went in there, or if he'd had 5
Yep.
horror movies under his belt and went in there. But another thing I love about the movie, which is probably worth talking about as well, is it captures that period in the late 60s through the 70s where there were a lot of monster
Mhm.
attacks, cryptozoological attacks. We don't talk about them very much anymore. And perhaps the influence of the John Greens and the Peter Burns has grown to such a level that most people like to think of Bigfoot as some type of friendly, hairy cousins in the woods to us or something. But the history of American Bigfoot encounters is the history of violent, creepy attacks on
Mhm.
lonely cabins and attacks on campsites and things reaching through the window to grab you. There's so many of those
Mhm.
stories, particularly in those older accounts. You probably hear a little bit less about them today, or at least they seem to get publicized less today. But back then, if you pick up books by John Keel,
Mhm.
or if you pick up older stuff by Lauren Coleman from back then, or if you watch movies like this, or if you read any
Mhm.
of the old Bigfoot
Yeah.
reports, even John Green has those kind of accounts in his book. He just says, "Oh, it was just confused. It was only trying to force its way into the house while people are screaming and grabbing their guns." Of course, it didn't know what. But the
Yep.
reality is, back then, there was an awful lot of this kind of, weird, literally horror movie stuff. And
Oh,
Boggy
yeah.
Creek does an amazing job of capturing something which cryptozoology, to be honest, doesn't talk about very much anymore, but it used to be a major part of this.
Mhm.
The story being, and we see a hint of it with the fact that there's only one Fouke Monster, for example, is
Mhm.
that cryptozoology hadn't become its own thing yet. People were still
Yeah.
encountering monsters like they were monsters. They were still
Yeah.
behaving in the way you would
100%.
expect them
Yeah.
to behave. Today,
Mhm.
most reports don't, some do, but most I hear don't
Mhm.
ring like they used to then. Then reports in books sounded like reports out of a horror movie.
Yeah. No. 100%. Like, you've nailed it. You've nailed it. And you're right. They they used I remember that time where they were monsters, right? Again, I'm a monster movie fan. Also, one of the reasons why I think I appreciate got into cryptozoology. Again, it is like monster hunting. And you're right. Like, I kind of tried to tone down and bring a little bit of I didn't try to play up the horror aspect of some of the stories in my book because I wanted to present it more informationally. But I've got stories where you read and you're like, that's a friggin' horror film. Like, that's one of the stories. I don't even know if should it be considered a Bigfoot? Should it be considered what it is? But essentially, there is a woman screaming, and the family's in the house, and they're looking out. There's a creature with red glowing eyes. The father goes outside. Woman's gone. They come back. The thing with the red glowing eyes is looking inside the thing at them. They all go out there. They're waiting with the gun. It's a horror film. It's a yes, please, guys, go. If you haven't seen this film, Craig's been nice enough to put the link in there. Go see, please watch this film. It's brilliant.
It's in the show notes too, by the way, or at least the general
Yeah.
Legend of BoggyCreek.com site, and then you can click through to the store. But for people who are listening, they can go and get that address in the show notes if they're not watching the actual show on YouTube or Facebook.
Yep. So yeah, you're right. I mean, cryptozoology used to allow for the monsterness of it. Like they weren't trying to, I hate to say it this way, but we do try and sanitize this a lot, I think. And I think part of it is the conceit of the time. We're trying to be more objective, scientific about it, whereas that was back in the day, it was a little bit more Indiana Jones, right? It's a monster story. And they present it that way versus let me try and be Jane Goodall to the critter that's walking through walls kind of thing.
And how many cryptozoologists were there even in America in 1972? There was maybe Ivan T. Sanderson,
Handful?
maybe Lauren Coleman was banging around, but back then he was more of a Keelian anyway. If you read, Creatures of the Outer Edge or The Unidentified, those books that he did with Jerome Clark point in a different direction. So there weren't cryptozoologists. Yeah, they weren't out there yet. You're right, but there were a few Bigfoot hunters, but there weren't people out there banging, sticks on trees and doing whoops to, to get that reaction. You're right. Of course, there was also absolutely John Green who had from Canada, and of course Peter Byrne had real money and was going around, doing serious investigations. But it wasn't like today where there was cryptozoologists everywhere. And it's interesting, and this is perhaps to put aside the reality or not of monster or cryptids for a moment. It's interesting that people like Ken Gerhard and Lyle Blackburn, who are two of my favorite guys in the field, by the way, but they're both quite open that they were monster kids. Like Lyle Blackburn is as into horror monsters as he is into cryptozoology, and Ken Gerhard, what's their show? What's the American Monster? You're in the first episode of it. What is it called?
The American Monster Tour.
Monster Tour. The one where they go and they visit the Ray Harryhausen Museum. I can't remember if that's in your episode or in the next one.
It's in my episode. And oh man, I got sick and I couldn't go. I was planning on going like the week after my interview to go to because I cannot tell you how much of a fan I am about Harryhausen. Right? It's stop motion. Love it. I missed it. I hate the fact that I missed it, but it's only a few hours away from where I live. Anyway,
but those guys bond over that. They
bond over that.
Regrets. Yeah, they bond over there too, right? Like Ken Gerhard and Lyle Blackburn are talking about how they were both monster kids in the 70s. Like they were interested in Bigfoot, but they were also interested in like that, I don't know, the Universal monster movie renaissance and Hammer monster films and Ray Harryhausen animations. Yeah. So Legend of Boggy Creek, I think pleased so many people at the time and influenced so many people because the same people who were enjoying the late night showings of the Universal monster movies were the same kids who were going to see this, and it was becoming part of their broader interest in a monster culture. So you have to kind of look at that movie like that as well. It's part of horror as much as it's part of the cryptozoological world, and in a way both of those 100%. Things impacted some of the best researchers in the field today. Some of the people who are the household names of cryptozoology today were monster kids.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'll take it one step further. I would suggest we don't even have the cryptozoology movement we have today without this film. I mean, just straight up. I don't think we have it. Because not only do we not get, obviously, Ken and Lyle, I don't think we get a lot of people. I can't tell you how many people I know who they're like, yep, no, it's this film. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing it. Like I said, not mine, But the vast majority of people I speak to, particularly Bigfooters, this is their film. This was, like you said, it's the gateway drug to cryptozoology. It's not just that it created the pattern that we saw with like Monster Quest and every other modern crypto documentary series that we see today, like small town monsters and all the others. It inspired people to get into it. Like you said, when this comes out, there's literally a handful of cryptozoologists now because of this film. A lot of people start thinking, it's like, well, hold on, maybe there is something out there, right? Obviously, it's not just this film. You've got In Search Of, you have all these other events, but this is a pivotal moment.
And this is before In Search Of too, remember? Like In Search Of doesn't drop until a couple of years after this, when is it like later in the 70s? This is very early,
that's
really.
Right. Yeah, it is. No, you're right. I forgot that In Search Of came later. I think, is it arguable then? Again, I hadn't even thought about that, but you're right. Does this help inspire In Search Of in a way? To show people that there's a market for this. This guy goes out in the middle of Texarkana, which they probably didn't even know what that. If you're in Hollywood, you have no clue what that is.
Right.
It's like, hey, they made this. Look at how profitable it is. Let's grab Leonard Nimoy and his porn stash and let's get running. I will never in my life forget that picture of Leonard Nimoy with that mustache. I love that so much.
And you're quite obsessed with the Nimoy.
The stash.
I love In Search Of as well. But this movie, In Search Of, all those, there was a film called Mysterious Monsters in the 70s. There was a bunch of stuff which there was, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm sentimental, or maybe it's because they're being actually shot on film added a weird depth or authentic or something to it. But there was
I agree 100%
of these when I watched them, and there still is today. Like if I go back and watch an In Search Of, or watch this movie, or watch Mysterious Monsters, or some of these 70s all shot on 35, or maybe some of them might even have been shot on 16, but there's a real grittiness and there's something spooky about it. Very few things are rewatchable today. I'll be honest. Me and my daughter love Monster Quest. She asks to watch it every second day. She adores it. Monster Quest is a modern production shot on video, which is still incredibly watchable. But I don't think there's very many modern things that I want to revisit. I've probably watched. I probably watched Legend of Boggy Creek, I don't know, conservatively 10 to 15 times in my life. I've watched this movie a lot. And ditto for In Search Of, I've watched it an awful lot. There's something about the period. There's something about the way it was shot. It's a magic. And for everybody listening who hasn't seen it, go and watch this movie. And if you hate it, you can send me hate mail. But I think you'll enjoy the film.
And mostly it's just because Dean wants mail. I mean,
any mail.
He's lonely out in the middle of nowhere.
Send me something. Tell me you hate me. Tell me you love me. I don't care.
There is something to that late 60s, early 70s, early to mid 70s aesthetic. And it's the film. It does just give it this feeling. It is, the aesthetics just grab you, right? Like it's gonna sound off topic for 2 seconds, but like some of the best comic book artists from a technical perspective are working right now. I don't think they're as good as Jack Kirby.
I don't think they're as good as John Byrne or Jim Starr.
Exactly. I was going to go off on it, but part of it though isn't. No, you're fine. It isn't the artists themselves. It is the coloring. It is the fact that it's on high glossy paper. There is something that the old school coloring, the newsprint brought to the aesthetic that made it unique, gave it its own texture, and now it's just all. It's crystal clear, and it's like that doesn't add anything to it. In the same way, these 60s, 70s aesthetic, that film, that graininess, there's this ambiance that's given over in that film that you just can't get out of your head. It just grabs you, and they're willing to let something sit and stick there, right? Like you said, the woman screams and it freezes on her terrified face, and it's like, we're gonna sit here and you're going to look at this for a while, and you're like, film, can we move on? No, You're going to look at this woman's terrified face, and you're going to like it. And you're like, okay, film, I guess I do. And then you do. And you're like, yeah, I do like this. I can't get out of my head because you put it there and it won't let go of you. This film grabs you. It won't let go of you. Even if you're not, it's like, okay, it wasn't really my taste when I saw it, because I did come into it later in life. But at the same time, I can't sit here and say that it's gotten out of my head either. Right?
If you're a fan of grindhouse cinema,
Mhm.
maybe if you're not even a fan of
Yes.
grindhouse cinema, this will make you a fan. Just something Ristol said very quickly, which is really important, and neither of us have mentioned it. It's a very, very good point because it's dead on. And he says the biggest
Mhm.
impact of the film was that it got people looking further
Yeah.
east than the Pacific Northwest for the large hairy hominids, and that's the absolute truth as well. Lyle Blackburn even
Yes.
makes that point, going, wasn't worried about the Bigfoot because that was in the Pacific Northeast or Northwest
Yeah.
rather, and now I've
Mhm.
seen Legend of Boggy Creek, and this thing just lives a couple hours from me down the road. So it bought
Yeah.
my, and the
Yes.
reality is people were seeing these things all over America anyway, but this movie elevated everybody's
Mhm.
awareness to, oh, I thought the Sasquatches
Yep.
only lived over up there. No, they're down
Yeah.
in Texarkana as well.
Oh, exactly. No, precisely. Like, again, with my sighting, it's no. Those weird things belong in exotic locales. Like, again, you're a young kid growing up in Dallas, Texas. The Pacific Northwest is as with trees that are taller than 25 feet. Like, that's as exotic a locale as you're going to, it might as well be the deepest Congo, right? Or Scotland, right? It might as well be as far away. But to your point, you're like, yeah. People are like, oh, wait, these things are everywhere? You mean those stories I heard growing, particularly if you grew up in a small town, everyone heard that story, right? Where it's, hey, the people in the woods or whatever. It allowed people to be like, oh, wait, maybe that's what we've been talking about, right? I've got friends who, again, to this day, they're still a little iffy about going down certain roads in Cedar Hill because of the goat man, which, yeah, I get it, right? It's that story.
Nancy Malcolm mentioned the movie about wolves in the city. It's the Wendigo version, Wendigo version of Bigfoot, and then she remembered it was called Wolfen. Wolfen, of course, was
Mhm.
written by none other than Whitley Strieber. So Strieber's
Oh,
injection of
yes.
Wolfen into the culture, it was also the man, perhaps more than maybe anybody,
Mhm.
most responsible for injecting alien abduction into the
Yeah.
popular consciousness in the 1980s. So that's interesting, Nancy, that film impacted you,
Mhm.
because Strieber has had a phenomenal impact, which I don't think is still really acknowledged. And in years to come, historians will be looking back and pointing at
Yep.
Strieber, I think, as incredibly significant in what a lot of us believe about aliens and the like.
Can I mention one thing that we haven't talked about at all? And
Sure,
if we
do it,
don't
man.
talk about it, I'm going to hate myself forever. And it occurs to me, I don't think we pulled that image real quick. But the poster for this film, right?
It was spectacular.
It's spectacular. It was done by Ralph McQuarrie. It was painted by Ralph McQuarrie. He's the guy who basically designed Star Wars. That's what, like, he was the lead production artist and designer for Star Wars. The reason Darth Vader looks the way he does, the droid, that's Ralph McQuarrie. The AT-ATs or the AT-AT walkers, right? From this, he designed those. Like, the man was brilliant. Ralph McQuarrie, it was a genius. He's one of those people that if you're in sort of the art world, you love his work. Lyle Blackburn used to own that painting. He gave it to Pamela a little while ago, but straight up, Ralph McQuarrie did that cover or did that poster, and that is I'm going to throw this out here, being the artist in the group or on the show. I think it. Thank you.
No problem.
I think that was as important. That painting right there is as important a reason for its success, its long-term success, and probably the initial success as anything else, because that's a friggin' brilliant image.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of art.
It doesn't get better than that. Look at it. How, we tend to, because we have all these, trailers and television shows and all these websites where it's like, we're going to we've been paid to tell you how awesome this movie is, right? And yes, if you didn't, everyone's like, wait, Rotten Tomatoes was fake? Are you just like, seriously? Yes, come on. The critics raved about Captain Marvel. Clearly they were paid off. Anyway, but this is before all that. You're a teenager. You want to go to a drive-in. What movie do we want to see? You see that poster? I'm going to go see that. Right? Look, I mean, just that image is so freaking brilliant. I saw it in real life when Lyle had it. Brilliant. I'm sorry. It's even more impressive in person.
I've wanted to get a copy of the one sheet for my office wall for a while, and I haven't actually. But it's also, you're absolutely right. And this is again the exploitation understanding of the advertising guru. I don't know if he was a guru, but his background in advertising of the director CharlesBPierce. But also, if you look down underneath the Legend of Boggy Creek, the fact that it was a true story was also pushed. Another great exploitation movie from the 70s that pushed the true story angle, of course, was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So there was an ongoing success of movies which were drive-in type movies or grindhouse type movies on pushing the true story element, as did CharlesBPierce's later The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Yes. As did Psycho, for example. There were movies that pushed and that was Psycho was obviously earlier, but you could push this true angle, and you could push the verite reality of it as well. Use a cinema verite style in your shooting, and lots of handheld stuff, lots of shaky stuff, and filmmakers were becoming aware that that type of technique and that type of marketing could result in a very successful film, which didn't require the type of money that Hollywood was spending on films to get people who wanted to get a fright, to get their bums on the seat. You could have a clever poster. And of course, this goes back to Roger Corman and people beforehand. But in the 70s, there was certainly this push in the grindhouse thing to have the true story, this shocking true story. And Boggy Creek fits that pattern as well. In fact, in many ways, Boggy Creek helped launch that pattern in the 1970s.
Yeah, 100%. Nancy, thank you for that super sticker. We really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks.
Y'all are great. Again, y'all are great. Y'all really are. So thank you, Nancy. We really do appreciate that. But yeah, this film was the right thing at the right time. And like you said, my resistance at the beginning, by the way, Mike A asks if it wasn't supposed to, is this based on a true story? Yeah, we talked about that at the beginning. That's one of the reasons I think that we both think for the impact is not only is it is that essentially these are not made up stories. These are true stories with a lot of times they're talking to the actual people involved. So it's, again, to Dean's brilliant point at the beginning, it takes your suspension of disbelief and throws it away. And it's like, I don't need you to suspend your disbelief on this, because you don't need to, because it's real, and just changes the entire context of the movie, right? It's sort of like, again, like what they did with the Blair Witch Project. They had to artificially create the idea that it was real. I remember coming out of the theater, there were people claiming, "Oh, no, it's real." I'm like, seriously?
Well, can you remember the marketing of that was genius? I saw the documentary about it before I saw the movie. When I happened to be in America in 99 when that film was released, and they had on a major network or a major cable channel here, a documentary about the Blair Witch Project, like it was a film about real events. So it was almost like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds in 1938. If you tuned in at the wrong time, or you caught the wrong piece of information about the Blair Witch Project, you thought you were seeing a genuine film. And interestingly, I must confess, a couple of times recently, because I've been watching a lot of paranormal documentaries, because I'm making not a paranormal documentary, but a documentary in the weird space. I've been like cruising through, the Tubies or the Amazon Primes or the YouTubes looking for documentaries. And sometimes I'll click on one, and there's so many now, I'll be 10 minutes in and I'll go, I think this is a horror movie which is kind of presenting itself. And I didn't read the fine print. And then I go back and go, this is like, but this found footage stuff, or this, this this horror movie masquerading, and there's no revelation in it. Like, there's nowhere, if you just happen to be watching it,
Yeah.
unless you were kind of somewhat cinema savvy, as I guess 95% of the public are today, that you would actually be told, no, you're watching a fake movie. So that War of the Well, that Orson Welles War of the Worlds experience is still a real one out there in, streaming land today for people.
Oh, you know what other movie does that really, really well? And it got me, was Fourth Kind with Mila Jovovich.
I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it, to be honest. But I'm conscious of the movie.
We have to review that film. You have to watch that film, because if you go in not realizing that it's because they will go through so much trouble to make you think that this is, yes, it's a movie, but it's about real stuff, and they'll intersperse the real people and real videotape in it. And even at the end, they're like, so many people have disappeared. And like the actor's like, to this date, so many people have disappeared from this small town in Alaska, and no one's looking into it in the FBI. And they created a website, the whole 9 yards. The city or the county that this is supposed to be, they sued the studio and won. And the judge was like, yeah, guys, you can't be running around doing this. You got stuff that looks legit out here. Like, they don't know. It's the average person, there's no way for them to know this is not a real thing. But the Fourth Kind pushes that envelope so hard that it's really hard to find out that it's fake. I mean, it's probably a lot easier now, but back in the day, they were really pushing that hard, and it's done in such a clever way. So we need to review that film as well. But back to our film, the one that literally started it all. Yeah, I mean, what Pierce did by getting the real people, interviewing the real people, and having them be part of the recreation, having the actors that he hires be local people, so they have the right accent, they talk the right way. It's brilliant. It captures everything at the right time. Like you said, it's a horror film, it's a docudrama, it's 1,000 things all at one, making its own beast. And that's why we love it. That's why it will be around. This is one of those things. This movie is going to be around and watched for the next 30, 40 years whereas a lot of these other movies and documentaries and all these just aren't, because this grabs you and will not let go of it.
And I would suggest the success of Small Town Monsters, although they made so much content now, really kicked up a notch when they made their Boggy Creek Monster movie, which is really a companion to the Legend of Boggy Creek. In fact, Lyle Blackburn has a similar device as the narrator we were talking about in the Legend of Boggy Creek, where at the end he kind of walks around, where the old homestead was or something in the original movie, and does a similar narration to the original narrator. And it actually even ties back visually with that film. And I think that's certainly the first film that made me conscious of Small Town Monsters. I know they'd done two smaller Bigfoot movies before then, but this was already such an iconic movie by, I think, making a documentary that tied in with that film, achieved so much success and interest. That's how I found out about Small Town Monsters and Lyle Blackburn when I played that film at the first Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Also did it with Legend of Boggy Creek as a double feature. But that from then on, Small Town Monsters got all the success it really deserved. It really boomed after that, but that was the first film that I think launched them into kind of the consciousness of people out there in, monster and cryptid fanland. So in many ways, we even have this movie to thank for Small Town Monsters today.
100%. Again, regardless of what you think about the film, it is probably the most important cryptozoological film ever made. It created this genre. Even I forgot that In Search of it came later, but which I think you could argue this is why we got In Search of. It's certainly the proto Monster Quest. All of this, it's the movie that launched 1,000 cryptozoologists, and it's brilliant. If you haven't seen it, there's no better time than now. Pamela did a great job getting it remastered and getting it out there so you can see it in its glory, right? Some of us remember this thing on a beaten up VHS tape from a Blockbuster.
That's how I saw it. Betamax. I saw it originally.
Or some pirated website like I did, where you can't see anything and it's all grainy. You can see it the way it was intended to be seen, and it is brilliant. It is absolutely worth watching. So definitely go pay money to see this. I can't say that often enough. Go watch it. You will thank us. And if you don't, please write Dean a letter talking about how much you dislike it and how much you hate him because he needs the mail.
I do. And we didn't clash anywhere near as much as I thought we would, Jason. So
all right, well,
we're expecting some.
We'll find something.
Dragged out.
I got to find something to wrestle with you on.
Yeah, we'll find something.
Maybe you won't like Willow Creek, and
I've seen it. I don't dislike it, but I won't rave about it the way I raved about this.
Okay, then we can fight on that when we get to it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's when I'm gonna have to drop a stone cold stunner on you.
There you go. The stunner, my favorite finisher in the history of wrestling.
So, in that note, we're going to put the gremlins to bed because this episode of Mysterious Library is over and it is past their bedtime. We love y'all. We'll catch y'all next time behind the card catalog. Good evening.